Hello, and welcome to episode 38 of Intercultural Insiders. My name is John McGraw, and I help newcomers, expats, and businesses connect across cultures to succeed in less time and pain. I am the founder of Hyaku Coaching, which is dedicated to helping you create your pathway to success in a new culture. The purpose of Intercultural Insiders is to share the stories of people with intercultural experiences. So if you're feeling isolated or lost, you can hear something from the guests' experiences that could help you, even if it's just a reminder that you're not alone. And today is part 2 of the interview with Courtney Bailey. But before we get into that, I've got an event to update you about, which is the next episode of Coffee with SOS, which is the monthly coffee events that are on Saturdays. This one is called Power Skills for Your Success in Canada, which is on Saturday, August 12th at 10 a.m. So, power skills, sometimes they may be referred to as soft skills, personal skills, or 21st century skills. But we've decided to refer to them as power skills. As you might know, there was a 2019 LinkedIn report that revealed that 91% of talent management professionals consider soft skills just as, if not more, important than hard skills. So any newcomer looking for a job in Canada can see the role soft skills plays in interviews and in being hired for positions in Canada and advancing in those positions. So come join us on Saturday, August 12th. Join HR professional Liliana Nakamura, noted LinkedIn optimization expert Hamad Siddiqui, and myself as we discuss power skills and how to leverage them in the Canadian job market and workplace. It is a virtual event, so to register for that, just follow this QR code. Use this QR code to register. Again, that's Coffee with SOS, Power Skills for Your Success in Canada on Saturday, August 12th at 10 a.m. I will show this QR code throughout the episode today. And with that said, let's get into our introduction of Courtney, for those of you who did not join us last time, and also as a reminder. So, Courtney is an English lecturer and education advocate who has traveled to various countries throughout Central and South America, Europe, and Eurasia. And she has served in multiple organizations helping refugees, women, and English learners all over the world. There's got a lot of feedback that the previous episode with Courtney had a very personal note to it. And it had a personal note to me as well, because of the connections of, there was a lot of talk about not only culture shock, but specifically reverse culture shock and coming back to your home culture after you've been away for some time. Now, this episode, we'll be talking about accent bias and native speakerism and addressing privilege and considering different perspectives and how that impacts the workplace, and also code switching in professional spaces. There's talk of that as well. And using skills and privileges to give back to others through advocacy and membership. So, for those of you who are concerned about adapting to other cultures and making different impressions, I think that this episode will be very informative for you. And as always, this interview is pre-recorded, but as you can see already, Courtney is live in the chat. So feel free to ask questions throughout and comment during the interview. Please feel free to use the chat space for that. Courtney and I will be paying attention. So feel free to comment on anything that you see that comes up, or if you have questions, you don't have to wait until after the interview to do that, to ask your questions. And use this not only as an opportunity to connect with Courtney and myself, but also with other audience members. As I mentioned previously, there was one person I know of at least who had an opportunity, found a job as a result of connections that she made through communicating with other audience members here, connecting here. So make yourself known, comment, and I encourage you to start off by posting where you're joining us from. Just say where you're from, and you can already see Courtney is in the chat already, waiting for you there. You can see that Emily Patterson. Emily, thank you for joining us. Please let us know where you're joining us from as well. So comments, start off with that, and feel free to add your comments and ask questions throughout the show. So without further wait, let's get into part 2 of the conversation with Courtney Bailey. You mentioned that you are a bilingual household. I'd like to explore, even though Turkish, as you said, is a very different language, how you felt that helped them to adjust.
Because I'm a lover of language, I'm always trying to incorporate language, even if I don't know it, whether it's listening to a different language on a podcast, or listening to music in a different language, or even having a cartoon in a different language, but then with English subtitles. I love the way it sounds. I think it's beautiful, and I want to expose them to different language or different culture via language, because the two are interconnected, in my opinion. And I've always wanted them to be bilingual, if not multilingual. I do think that having them in the dual immersion school here in the United States helped them feel comfortable with hearing different sounds and knowing subconsciously how to work out what they don't understand. Because the way that their school works here is their math and science is taught completely in Spanish. And then, of course, their ELA and more text-based courses are taught in English. So half of the day is spent in Spanish, half in English. And then as they get older, they start to incorporate more and more Spanish. So maybe their history class might become a lot more Spanish-based rather than taught in English. So I think that, like I said, knowing that different languages exist and that these sounds have meaning and they've connected, they use their memory a lot, certainly help them adapt a lot quicker than maybe someone that's monolingual, or maybe someone that's not used to different sounds or even dialect. So I definitely think that served us well in that space.
I can see how that would be beneficial in the beginning, to already be open to different ways of communicating.
The school, though, was very helpful because they recognized I had 4 kids that were learning, and they wanted them to set them up for success. So the principal actually took it upon himself to choose teachers for every single one of them. And they had pull-out sessions. So when the rest of the class was having an English lesson, they were having a Turkish lesson. So that really helped improve their proficiency as well.
Yes, that's fantastic. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about what you do. And I know that you've talked about, in terms of language education, the ideas of privilege, particularly when it comes to accents and privilege in international spaces.
I say I'm an advocate, and so that definitely comes from my experience in teaching in Turkey. I am considered a native speaker because I have an American passport and English is my first language. I'm an Anglophone, and I get that. What I didn't understand before I left to teach abroad is that people that speak English or as a second or subsequent language that are from any other country that's not considered an Anglophone country are maybe looked down upon, or not necessarily as valued as someone with an American or an English or Canadian, South African passport. And I realized that I was treated maybe with more respect. I was considered the expert, and I was just referred to as this prestigious person. And I didn't feel that I warranted that. I didn't feel like I deserved that. Yes, I had education, and yes, I had credentials, and yes, I speak English well, but one of my colleagues who happened to be from Iran or from Russia or from Pakistan, and I didn't like that, and I didn't realize that I had privilege until I went over there. And so now I'm earning my PhD in education with concentration in English language learning, and my dissertation is about the disparities between native and non-native English language teachers and what we can do to effectively bring awareness to this and eliminate these disparities between the two groups. And I don't even like saying native and non-native teachers. I don't like the terminology. It's just so harmful. But for the purposes of helping everyone to understand, that's important to me that we recognize that there is privilege in language. And it doesn't always have to be a negative thing. So that the case that I shared with you was negative, but I'm hoping to turn it on its head and make it positive. And there's so many different groups on LinkedIn and these professional spaces that help us understand native speakerism and what that means and what we can do as native speakers and as I like to call non-native speakers, multilingual speakers, because in a lot of cases they speak more than 2 or 3 languages, if not even more than that. But also, as I said, language being a privilege, it goes without saying that English is the lingua franca. This is a business language. This is the language of the world. Not to say that it's any better than any other language, but it is helpful to know it. And so there's a lot of people that don't have access to education or quality access to education. And so I've partnered with a lot of different organizations and NGOs. One organization is Girls Global Ready, which is based out of Poland, and it serves young women that are hoping to elevate themselves in some way, shape, or form, professionally or academically, but using English as a medium to get there. And so I'm a mentor to a couple of mentees there in Poland. And then there's also Paper Airplanes, which is an organization that serves conflict-affected individuals with business and professional skills and with English. And so I serve as a mentor to 3 different mentees in Syria. So I realized that, yes, I have a privilege, but I can use it for good. And so that's what I hope to do. And by doing that, helps me feel more confident with what I'm doing and just giving back to international spaces and to continue my intercultural connection with individuals that I might not have a connection with if it wasn't for the language component.
It sounds like you're doing quite a bit to raise awareness around native speakerism and I think accent discrimination as well. So some people might say, okay, well, that's something that language teachers can be concerned about. But is it something that would concern people outside of that profession?
I think that where we just have a tendency by nature to be self-conscious if we are different, we sound different, if we look different, that we stand out. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. And so I teach online with different people around the world. Again, I'm always trying to stay connected in different spaces. And I had a 15-year-old girl from Mexico, and her parents are well-to-do, and they really want to give their child the best, and they want her to sound authentic and not have an accent. I said, but her accent is beautiful. She's intelligible. It's not a problem at all. She sounds wonderful. There's nothing that I feel like I need to correct. So I had to say, I'm not sure that I can serve you the way that you want to because she sounds perfect to me. And so there is a lot there. And so when we think about the stakeholders, so that would be the student, the parents, or extensions of these individuals that are wanting the language, we have to rewrite what is considered ideal. And it's okay to have preferences. I'm not saying that people can't have preferences. I happen to think that the British accent is just stunning and beautiful, and I love it. But there shouldn't be a hierarchy there when it comes to languages or dialect.
This is something that I had personally gone through a bit of a change when I'd been teaching pronunciation. It wasn't up until a couple of years ago where I had found a discussion with Heather Hansen, a communications consultant based in Singapore, who was also an ESL teacher for some time. And previously, she had done a lot of focus on pronunciation and helping Singaporeans to develop a more American style accent. And then she went through a change of thought and thinking, what exactly is it that I'm doing here? Why am I pushing this idea? So that's what really got me interested in the concepts of accent bias and native speakerism.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. We talk about the uniform standardness is the only way to say it, I guess. And so when we can certainly want to use something as an exemplar, like I said, we can have preferences, but when it comes to saying something is better than the other, that's when I take issue with it. And it's actually within cultures as well as intracultural, because there's actually a movie on Netflix right now. It's called Sorry to Bother You. And it's a movie about telemarketers. And so it was actually somebody a person of color. And then someone said, well, use your white voice and you'll be more successful in this role. So there are dialects and vernaculars and things like that. It's not just intercultural, it's intracultural. And it's something that's worth looking into and recognizing, why do we feel this way? Like, where does this come from? Where are there stereotypes and biases connected to it? And where do those originate? It's important to understand because this is all a part of culture. It's all a part of language. It's actually a really interesting concept and a really interesting movie. And it does shed light on what we're talking about, at least in an intracultural perspective.
Yeah. And in a previous episode, there was a brief discussion that came up in the chat about code switching.
So I told you that I teach business and professional English at an HBCU here in South Carolina. And I felt that it was important to help them understand what code switching is. And what I explained to them is a strategy. because there is a standardness and people do prefer a certain standard of English, a certain variety, a certain dialect, a certain accent. Code switching is important for them to understand because there is a strategy there that we need to understand. We're not always going to fit in certain spaces as far as professional cultures or work cultures. It's important that young people, especially people of color, understand that we have to be strategic because there's biases there and that there's just no other way to say it. There are biases that exist. And if we want to be successful, then we need to understand how to basically play the game and how to set ourselves up for success when it comes to code switching effectively in professional spaces. I had to be very particular about my words, and I'm not saying that we can't be colorful in the workplace. I'm not saying that we have to minimize ourselves or reduce our personalities or who we are, but there's work culture anywhere you go. And so we need to understand that, and we need to make sure that it aligns with our values and who we are and learn how to effectively code switch with our language, the words that we use, our tone, all of these things.
There is a focus now in terms of bringing your authentic self to work on mental health. And there could potentially be an adverse effect of that need to code switch, depending on what perspective you're coming from. So I guess in terms of when it comes to, say, code switching and being authentic to yourself, probably not an easy question to answer, but ways to resolve that in some way or be able to make that fit, whether it's a compromise of some kind, I'm not really sure.
Again, if we look at code switching like a strategy rather than a minimizing activity, I think that certainly helps. I think it's our mind frame, right? We can make anything positive or negative with the way that we approach it, and we really have to own it. So we get to effectively have two different ways of communication, two different ways to interact with people. And that can be a beautiful thing. We code switch in different situations. It's not just in the professional workspace. It might be when we're having an interview, or it might be if we have an interaction with a doctor, or it just depends on what situation that you're in. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing. This is actually a skill and it should be developed, and we should be teaching people how to effectively read the room. Remember, I said that we need to read our environments and understand what's appropriate and what's not. Not to say that anybody at their root of who they are is inappropriate. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But there's a way that we can interact effectively in these professional spaces. And so we need to do our part to research and understand, and then lean into that with developing ourselves in that capacity. And as I said, code switching can certainly be viewed as a negative thing, but I think that we have enough to work with where we can certainly make it positive and use it in our favor.
Not exactly in the same context, but a colleague of mine who's from India and has been in Canada for some time, he described it in terms of the differences of being Indian or being Canadian or Indo-Canadian. One way he described it was like putting on a dress, going to a special event. And then you go home, you put what's comfortable for you. Or I've also heard it described as, and I think it applies not just for code switching, but just adapting to any culture in general, is the idea that it's not changing who you are. It's an add-on, as you said. It's like a skill of some kind.
I love that analogy about the dress because you're still the same person underneath. And I love it. That's wonderful. I've never heard that before, but I'm going to start using it.
That's what I said when I heard it from him.
Credit where credit's due.
Exactly. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about yet that you would like to address?
I think it's important to, again, just reiterate that I get a lot of purpose through advocacy and mentorship. And that's just because I recognize that I have a skill or a quality or a privilege that I can use in order to give back to others. And so I want to encourage other people to basically take a personal inventory of the skills that they have and see where they might be able to use their expertise or just something that they are born with to serve other people. I love to be of service. And I think that everyone should endeavor to try and help someone or help a lot of someone's if they can. So I think that, like I said, with being interculturally connected and having that cultural competence has really helped me develop and understand that the world is a lot larger than me. And there's a lot that can be done, and it can start with me. I want to encourage other people to do the same. Like I said, taking that personal inventory of what they're skilled at. And then I just want to empower people. I want to empower and inspire, and I want other people to empower and to inspire. That can certainly come with, like I said, that cultural competency and language.
the organizations that you mentioned. Can you tell a little bit more about Paper Airplanes and some of the other ones that you mentioned?
Yeah, Girls Global Ready. So it's Girls Future Ready under the Girls Global Ready Foundation. So they have LinkedIn and they're on social media. And like I said, that's based out of Poland, and they help women achieve their goals in academia and then also their professional goals in addition to their linguistic goals. And then paperairplanes.org. And as I said, they are an NGO that is working to serve conflict-affected individuals through service, particularly with their business and technical skills, in addition to their language skills as well. They also have a newsletter. They're on LinkedIn. I'm not sure that they're on Instagram, but they are definitely on LinkedIn, and they're quite active with their advocacy and recruiting for different mentors and teachers that might be able to help serve their demographic of students. And they're not young students. These are working adults. As I said, I'm currently mentoring 3 individuals from Syria. One is a lecturer, the other is a computer engineer, and the other, she's a scientist. This is a wonderful organization, and it's put me in contact with a lot of great people. I'm working to develop my skills as well, because what I'm doing with them is I'm looking at their cover letters and their CVs or their resumes, and I'm giving feedback on those. We're holding mock interviews. They're doing presentations. So they're real life skills that we're working to develop together. It's nice for me to, again, that representation as far as an American person, American woman of color. I want to make sure that even when I'm behind a computer screen, I'm still giving off those same vibes, that same energy that I was so mindful of and so careful of when I was walking the streets of Turkey. So it's important that people actually do the research. I actually found the Girls Global Ready organization in the most random way. I was interested in what it takes to move to Poland, and I found it through the online embassy website. Things come up in the weirdest way. So I do encourage people to connect and look and dive into these spaces and see what organizations they might be willing to partner with in order to be of service to someone that could really use their help.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
I think I would just encourage everyone to travel far and wide and to really lean into those experiences. As I said, for me, every experience, whether it was a short-term traveling experience or a long-term experience abroad, it has really shaped and informed me as a person. And I've taken, as I said, those souvenirs and helped me to be a better person. And I'm still working on myself. I'm a work in progress, but I know I can confidently say that I'm a better person because I've been able to experience different cultures and different languages. And I'm hoping to, like I said, impart that to other people that might be listening or that might be interested in traveling or living or working abroad. It's a great experience, and it is what you make it. We can have positive or negative experiences, but it's all in the mindset, and to go into things with, I can't say with no expectation, but with fewer expectations. So that way there's no disappointment and you can really craft your experience. I wrote an article once for International TEFL Academy, and I said, I want to live a life of design, not a life of default. And I do think that with going abroad and crafting this experience to be what I wanted it to be, I started living by design rather than just floating and taking what life threw at me. So that's important to remember too.
Living by design, not by default. I love that.
Exactly.
I love that. Courtney, I want to thank you so much for all of what you've shared today, your experiences and the work that you're doing to help others in need. It's really valuable.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me a platform to speak on some of my experiences. And this is so important to me. So thank you for your time and for the questions. I really enjoyed this.
That was part 2 of the conversation with Courtney Bailey. And I want to thank Anestea from, who is the head of On the Spot Language courses. Again, it's a school where you can come to Toronto and learn, practice English in real world situations out on the street with Canadians, and rather than being stuck in a classroom. Just wanted to acknowledge him for connecting Courtney and myself together. And there were a lot of great things that Courtney mentioned. I'm just going to highlight a couple of the links that to the organizations that Courtney mentioned. First of all, Paper Airplanes. There is the QR code here. I did It is available in the LinkedIn live chat as well, but if you want to see it here, paperairplanes.org about working with individuals in conflict. Courtney can correct me about the information that I might be getting wrong there. And then the other organization that she mentioned is Girls Future Ready. So again, to find out more information, simply follow the QR codes here to learn more. Really what Courtney said about being able to give back in different ways and help out those in need. I think that paperairplanes.org and Girls Future Ready are two possible ways to do that. And I really love, again, what Courtney said about living a life by design, not by default. And I think that that is something that's resonated with me in terms of the changes that I've made. And I think all of us who are taking the risks of going to another culture, going into another country, there's a lot of risk involved. For those coming to Canada or for anywhere, there is risk involved, and just that expression, going out of your comfort zone, is something that's maybe often overused, but it's true, and that by taking risk and living the life by design rather than just going in through the motions and seeing what opportunities there are out there and how you can make an impact and have a better life, but also make an impact on others is so important. And I really admire Courtney for living a life by design, as she said. A couple of other great comments that are coming up in the chat. Yes, from Kelly Maria, who recently connected with travel can broaden one's perspectives by eliminating bias and misconceptions. I definitely think that's true. And I think to add on to that, I would also say that it's important to do that with intention. And particularly, as Courtney mentioned, I think it was mainly in the previous episode, the idea of being a traveler rather than a tourist, in the sense of connecting with people in an authentic way there, rather than, of course, enjoying the great sites and events that are going there, but finding ways to connect with the local people and get a more authentic experience. And yes, again, Liliana also finding the idea that living by design, not by default. Beautiful phrase. Beautiful phrase. Yes, I completely agree. As I already mentioned in that recorded interview, Liliana. And yes, other comments about Girls Future Ready and the impact that it has. So it's been, again, thank you for sharing all of those links, Courtney. And that's bringing us up to the end of our episode for today. But for those of you who have been paying attention through Intercultural Insiders Info, the newsletter, you may already know about the next guest coming up. And this one's going to be a great conversation. David Mendoza, who is the CEO of Orbit 5. He is an international educator, originally from Colombia, came to Canada a number of years ago. So he has over 10 years of experience designing and facilitating engaging solutions to help international students and newcomers increase their confidence to land ideal jobs in less than 15 weeks. And we have a great conversation. David talks about entrepreneurship and how teaching private English lessons sparked his interest in entrepreneurship and taught him the value of taking risks, building community. He shares some of the impactful experiences that he had from his teaching career, and networking and self-worth, and encouraging students to eliminate self-undermining language and understanding that everyone has value to add. So for more information on that, I encourage you to check out the Intercultural Insiders Info. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to that. You can subscribe following this link. The first episode of the conversation with David is on Wednesday, August 9th at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So be sure to join in and participate, connect with David, connect with myself, connect with the other audience members. It's a great opportunity. And yeah, I there's so much I can say about it, so much more I want to say about it, but time is running out. So what I will leave you with is the same words I always leave off with, which is until next time, keep navigating your way between cultures towards your goals.